Hi everyone, let's talk about Arkham Horror 3rd Edition. So, Arkham Horror the 2nd Edition was pretty much the first kind of modern board game I played. It was the second, really, but we forget the other one to history. Sorry, World of Warcraft game. And yeah, it was way before I played any of this stuff or even really knew about the wider world of gaming. Just stumbled upon this in a shop, bought it, and loved the idea of a board game where you pretty much had no chance of winning. And you just tried to play through the story and just watch yourselves desperately lose as you would try and shut these gates, and then probably you would not succeed at that, and one of the old ones would spawn, and you would have a big epic fight with it and probably lose. And we were okay with that. As times have moved on, if you've seen my other videos, I've become less enamored with this style of game and more into Euro games and games involving less luck and more economies and trading in the Mediterranean and things like that. But anyway, Arkham Horror is where it all started. So I played the 2nd edition loads and loads and loads. I haven't played it for probably a few years now. But yeah, we enjoyed those kind of... It was the game of the night. It would take up the entire night and sometimes the entire day. I remember, 6-player games of it and things. Just you play it over an entire day and really get in-jokes and stories going with your characters. And so the 3rd edition is trying to take this massive sprawling thing, this enormous table hog with its ridiculous city-wide map, a million decks of cards everywhere, and is hoping to modernize it and streamline it. And it's done that in incorporating, in kind of amalgamating a lot of other games. These are Arkham Files, I've been told, in the Arkham Files series, the kind of obscured goals from, say, Mansions of Madness and the card game, the Arkham Horror, I can't remember what the L stands for, the Arkham Horror card game. They don't particularly tell you what your end goal is, just that your goal for the moment is to do this thing. And then when you do this thing, you'll find out what the next thing to do is. And there's not just a win goal for the scenario. It's definitely the Codex cards borrow very heavily from the card game as well, in that once you've got this many good things, move on to this card. Once you've done this many bad things, move on to this card. And eventually one path is going to win you the game, one path is going to lose you the game, and one path can mess with the others. Like if you haven't seen the playthrough, there's going to be spoilers for it. So yeah, watch all 20 hours of that or whatever it's going to end up being. As bad things were happening in that codex, they were kind of, if you've done this good thing, forget about that now. You've messed up too much. It uses that from the card game. The codex as well is not exactly, but similar to how things work in Fallout, especially with you getting clues and then you shuffle them into the top 2 cards of each of the neighborhood decks. It does the encounters quite well from there as well, except this game has got an actual ending to it. But yeah, it's kind of standing on the shoulders of giants, using all of the influence, all of the iteration from the games that have come before, as well as Arkham Horror itself. I think it definitely retains that feel, even though the huge city board is gone and you are just focusing on a few districts of the game. You've still got that feeling of, getting to know your character, of building up all of these crazy things, all of the, the anomalies that come out that aren't in every scenario. But you're trying to deal with the anomalies, you're trying to deal with the monsters that are coming out, you're trying to gather all of the clues. It's still this great big epic thing. Shrunk down in time, definitely, although don't base that on the playthrough. We've played it 2 other times for real, and they were both within 2 hours, I think. The first one was a 3-player game, second one was a 2-player game. I wouldn't say any of them went over 2 hours. Maybe with teaching, the first one did. But yeah, this one... yeah, just in a weird situation of just perpetually, and it's kind of a thing that can happen with the game because your lose state is specified on the cards, and whenever your investigators die, they just come back to life as a new investigator. That kind of presents a problem that if you're not doing very well, but you're doing just well enough to keep your head above water, to keep the status quo rather than getting anything, rather than improving anything in the game, you can kind of just keep lasting, as I did there. I probably should have just risked some more things and gone for some more clues. And eventually, if the game had just gone on, maybe I would have won it, maybe I would have lost it eventually. But yeah, the playthrough honestly went on for hours and hours and hours and hours. But yeah, I think it definitely has that feel from the 2nd edition that you are on this kind of more centered quest. I never played Eldritch Horror, so I can't compare it to that. but you are on this quest to save Arkham. There is this thing that's happening. All of this strangeness is, it's done in the codex cards themselves, in the clue cards that go into each of the encounter decks, in the specific anomaly deck that you've got in yours if your scenario has got anomalies. I'm not sure if all of them have. I've played 2 of the scenarios. I played the starting one and this one. I was going to do a brand new one for the scenario, but Rach wants to see what the other scenarios are like. So it fits the story in through the different decks and the codex card that you are doing. The monsters as well are specifically chosen for the deck, and that is similar to those other games as well. They give you that more tailored experience. The gathering clues. Yeah, sometimes I really like how the locations give you an indication as to what you're going to need when you were there. So you're not just there high and dry with something that you completely didn't need. But the clue encounters often really change that, and in an annoying way. That now you need observation. Well, none of these spaces needed observation, but this thing does. And maybe you're looking for clues. That kind of makes sense. But yeah, you can't. You can sometimes get a good idea, and sometimes it does follow the path, but sometimes the clue cards need something completely random in there, and there's nothing much that you can do. So the deck that really annoys me, then you might have got across this in the playthrough, is the headline deck. There's a big deck of these, you deal out 13, and every time that headline comes out of the Mythos Cup, which we'll get onto later, you draw one of these cards, and they are basically there are some headlines, some very brief headlines, got pretty much nothing to do with the text that happens on the card, and it's usually just random silly thing happens, random bad thing happens, put 3 things on here, now you take damage, and yeah, they can be really, really bad and happen really, really early on, and it's kind of a weird thing about this, because yeah, we have enjoyed our plays. I will try and make that clear before I start complaining about things in it, and it's definitely a kind of a boon for the game, because it's not the kind of game that I like anymore, really. That it's a kind of game that I tend to get frustrated with, but I didn't here and did really enjoy the experience and the story of it. But I accept that there is randomness in the game. It's Arkham Horror. It's what it's built on. You are just doing tests with dice. It's the standard. Your stat means you roll that many things, and a 5 or a 6 is a success. Yeah, it's done in a lot of the other games before, and I wasn't expecting anything like that to change. But I think as some things have kind of been mitigated and improved, certainly the way that the rate at which you get items, you can do actions to get money, so you're not just left with nothing. You are seemingly, based on the encounters, given items a ton, items and allies and things, loads and loads and loads, to the point where I personally have never had an encounter where I've had to buy an item. I think we did actually in the playthrough, where you could buy an item for half price and then get a clue. I've never really seen the shop. I've just been given things, and that is, you can't really expect balance or similar experiences even from game to game in this. It's something you just have to know going in, because when you gain these items, I'll just gain the thing that costs 6 money and that's insanely good and that gets me an extra action every turn. The second time we played this, I got an ally early on, I think he came out in this playthrough, that gave me an extra action every single turn, and then the other character got an item that I think is a pocket watch that gave them an extra action every turn. Suddenly, we're doing 50% more actions every single round from quite early on in the game. That's a vastly different experience from just playing it normally. And yeah, if you are just gaining these items that are really, really expensive usually to try and balance out when you will be able to get them, just gaining a load of them can really skew the game in your favor. If you just manage to get those right encounters and the right items come out, it can be really skewed based on that. And based on the headline cards that you've chosen. There are good ones in there. I don't think any good ones came in this particular playthrough. But yeah, the combination of the order of all of these things can really, really just make the game wonky. Which is, if you just know that going in, it's okay. The monsters, particular, bad ones and good ones are put in here. And depending on how long the game goes on, you will encounter a strict number of them. Maybe a few more, but you will at least encounter them every so often. But, based how they come out, it might just be the really, really low, the cultist with 1 health and things. And the big monsters, you just manage to win before you ever get to those. And in another game, it can just be the ridiculous monsters straight away are the first ones that spawn. Not in the initial setup, but after you've drawn them from the Mythos Cup. And so, yeah, you're going to have a really, really rough time. Hope that your damage dealers are doing well and that you haven't got too many anomalies on the go, because now this has to be a big thing for you, because otherwise they're just going to kill you, which isn't going to end the game for you. It's just going to get you a new investigator. But yeah, can be wildly, wildly different experiences. Not in terms of story or anything like that, but in terms of, difficulty, the flow of the game. Yeah, that can be wildly different from game to game. But even though all of these things can be, different and there's good and bad in them, I think the headline deck is just really, it gives you no real reason why any of this is happening. I think that it's taken a really good step towards more storytelling in the codex cards that come out, in the specific clue cards to your scenario. These generic, just something bad happens, random nothing event cards are the kind of frustrating thing that I just hate in games. And I hate it when any of these silly nothing things happen, but these seem to be harkening back to that. We need to have something that just, no matter what you do, slaps your hand away and just says no. I think that if there was a reason for it happening, if there was something to mitigate it or whatever, something more interesting than just a card that's just put a monster out, you take 6 damage. It's just silly. It's just random nothing and it's silly. So, while we're complaining, a big thing that I thought about the game, and this is true for a load of Fantasy Flight games, so not just specific to Arkham Horror, but I don't think I've ever had a moan about it, so I'm going to do it right now. Components. This is Fantasy Flight. This is one of their flagship games. Not only the Arkham Files series, but Arkham Horror is the grandfather of them all, really, isn't it? This is the big relaunch of it. And I know before any comments come in that they don't do this in any games, but it's time for it to change. They don't come with the games just come with a terrible little insert, which is fine. Loads of games come with rubbish inserts. No bags to put anything in. Are you supposed to just have all of these ridiculous number of tokens just loose in the box? Million decks of cards all just in one bag. That's okay, but what about all of this stuff? Arkham Horror, the original, came with so many characters and so many different things. This comes with a load of characters as well. But now we're only going to give you enough stands just for the number of players that you can play with. Up to 6, I think it is. So now you're going to have to take these in and out. Fine, that's not a big deal, is it? But if you are really into this and you're going to keep this for years and you're going to play this again and again and again, every time you play this, you take the standees out and you put them back in. And these, they're not the worst. They're not the strongest grip in the world, but they're still making an indent. You can see an indent on all of the standees as you take them out. And, from game to game, you're going to be ending up damaging these. The punch board is, standard. It's not thinner than normal, but the way that the jigsaw board works, the edge of these tiles, after only a few games, the actual jigsaw pieces are wearing out already. And that's going to be an issue if, thinking of years down the line, or if you're just obsessed with Arkham games, if you're playing this all the time, things like that are going to wear out really quickly. But I feel like things like the bags and these standees, not having just one for every character that's in the game, and these dice, what are these horrible, cheap, just generic dice? They could have been anything. They just seem like penny pinching efforts that are a real letdown. They are not something to hold against the game massively that will change your opinion of the game. But these things make such a difference when you're unboxing the game and you are discovering all of the new elements of it and punching it out, and your anticipation of actually playing the game. And when it comes to these things, that you're just like, oh, it's another Fantasy Flight game. They haven't bothered doing this, and what are the magical, mystical dice we're going to be rolling in this game? These things. Oh, right. Yeah. I guess it could be a symptom of being spoiled on all of the Kickstarters and things that are out there. But and I know that it's not Fantasy Flight's focus, but maybe they should put a bit more attention, a bit more effort into it, because other Asmodee companies, Days of Wonder, Space Cowboys, and I'm sure way more than that, put so much effort into the presentation as well as the gameplay and the other components. It's not a huge factor to say, oh, don't buy this, it hasn't got bags in the box. But yeah, it's a negative little impression when you are getting the game for the first time. And yeah, I think that these things are very much penny pinching, especially when at events and things they're giving away. If you go to one of their Arkham Files events, you get some special bespoke Arkham horror dice. This game isn't cheap, and I don't normally comment on that because I got given this game to make a video for, so I haven't paid anything for it. So how can I really complain about any kind of penny pinching? But yeah, I think when this game costs £60, more than that, yeah, it comes with a lot of cards and things. But yeah, you could have put the extra effort in, couldn't you? Especially since this is a Fantasy Flight game. You know that expansions are coming for this, announced or not. Big things are coming for this, and they're not going to be as regular as the card game expansions, but there's going to be a ton of them. They're going to get their money's worth out of the fans in there. I think it would have been nice to reward people with some nicer things. But generally, the artwork's nice. I thought the board would be really weird. It's a bit weird kind of seeing the table through it rather than having a great big board for it. But yeah, I like the way that it's represented. I like the way that the network that it forms kind of helps you get around. You are no longer stuck one end, and getting to the other end of the map is going to be a nightmare. You can kind of get across relatively easily. In a couple of turns, you can pretty much cover the whole thing, especially if you've got some money to do so. Because that was kind of a worry. When we play this with 2 players, is it just going to be hard to cover all of the map? And it's definitely harder, but it's just easier with fewer Mythos tokens. So it's just a different experience rather than a much worse one. So yeah, overall, I've just been speaking for ages, really, haven't I? I think it does some really good work in storytelling. It takes it from the card game, though. It does this kind of not so much a branching story, but a story that can change based on how well you have achieved it, and your win and loss conditions can change based on your performance as well. That's a much bigger improvement. In some scenarios, in the first scenario that we ended up just losing, it was a shame to be missing the great big battle with an old one that kind of was your, a last bit of entertainment before we finally got destroyed in the second edition. But, this scenario, we won this scenario quite comfortably when we played it 2 players. So, it was good to kind of fail this one in the end and see that, there is an epic battle at the end of it. The two scenarios, I will say, though, that their general structure is very, very similar. There's a different old one. There's different things. This is a load of references to underwater. The other one was a load of references to time travel. Those things are different, but the general structure of the game was almost exactly the same. That you need to keep doing this thing that will, and these tokens have been put out. So go and find these tokens, and then find the right one, and then that's going to lead to the final stage. And this one was just, put these spoilers, mute it for a minute if you don't want any spoilers on the story. But it's a Cthulhu story. Come on. The win condition for this was do those 4 things that were going to come out on the board, and then we need to go to one location and do one more check, and that's it. And the loss, to be honest, was a lot more interesting. The win was just, okay, we finally did all this, we finally overcame all of this. And then the final card comes out, story, climax, all of this, and it was just walk here and do that test. That's a bit deflating. But yeah, the general structure was get clues on the card. Now all of these things are going to come out. Go to them individually. Now go to this one place and do this. Yeah, I've only played 2 of the 4, but I'm kind of getting a bit of Mansions of Madness feeling. I was really, really enthused about Mansions of Madness if you watch my first impressions. After playing the first scenario or 2 and kind of being really pumped up at the possibilities for the game. I should probably do updates for these things, but where's the time? Eventually we played more Mansions of Madness, played all of the different scenarios, played some DLC scenarios, and in the end, this is just the same thing over and over and over again. The names are different, but the structure is almost exactly the same every time. And the game is just either longer or shorter, and we just got bored of it in the end. The card game, I'll say, this is my Arkham Files video rather than just Arkham Horror. The card game, I would say that initially I was kind of hopeful, but in the end disappointed and negative about it, kind of because of the Mythos cup in that. But and the fact that the scenarios in that were so similar. I've since gone back and played a different pack, a different series with a couple of friends. And it was a very much a different experience. There was one on a train, there was one in a casino. They've kind of taken the idea and done different things with it. And it's been going on so long now that they are probably branching out and trying more outlandish and interesting things. And I really enjoyed that far, far more than I did the base box. maybe that is going to be the case with this. I've still got 2 scenarios to play. There's going to be expansions and new things, and maybe they're going to take it further with expansions, and it's too much to expect the base box to do that. But yeah, I would like those to have been a bit different. And yeah, I forgot to say again, this was true with the card game as well. Put a little cloth bag in your games. The fact that it has to say in the rules, oh, here's the Mythos Cup, here's this great thing. Provide your own, please. Come on. Altiplano, Orlean, they came with like 4 or 5 bags each. Do you know why? Because the game would be stupid if you didn't have bags. If you just told everyone, oh, everyone bring a cup to game night, put a bag in your box, you late. Oh, I don't know. There's reasons probably isn't there that I don't know about. I don't know anything that's going on in the industry. It just seems like another, penny pinching, silly kind of, stick your tongue out to the person unpacking the game when they're reading the rules for the first time. The Mythos Cup in this, though, way better than Arkham Horror, the card game. It isn't being used to resolve, though. It's dice, which is very similar to the card game's bag. This is doing, random things at the end of each thing, but it's balanced out in that you don't put them straight back in when they come out. So it's giving you a more cohesive experience. It's balancing out how many monsters can come out, how often they can come out, how often those gate breaches and the reckonings will happen. It's dictated by the scenario sheet itself, but you aren't just putting things back in that cup every single time. This has been long. I apologize for that, and muddled. And I hope it hasn't come across too negative, because I've been very pleasantly surprised with the stuff that I've found in here. It's essentially just comes down to run around, do a load of tests with dice and things, but the suspension of disbelief, the storytelling, that definitely it borrows very, very heavily from the card game, do really, really elevate it. And the only thing would be, are these scenarios going to feel any different? Now that I've seen the good and the bad of this scenario, and the majorly wasn't that different, am I going to want to play it again? Are the other 2 scenarios going to do something different? I really hope that they do. Or are we going to have to wait for expansions for it to be different? And the maybe the biggest thing that's holding it back, not just that crazy wonky balance that can happen depending on how all of these things come together, the length of the game. It's still, 2-hour plus thing, and when you can just kind of tread water and last for 4 or 5 hours, whatever this game was, unedited, it took that long. It's such a long thing, and I don't feel like the experience in general is doing more than the card game at the moment. This base box versus the card game, whichever scenario pack I played, however many along they are by now. I'm sure someone could say in the comments, it was the one with a train and a casino, and it was fun. That can just be played in short bursts. Or you can play loads of scenarios in one day if you've got a big day for gaming. You can decide with that. And not only has it got this, in each scenario, it's got the variable win and loss things. It's got choices that you made during the scenarios that are affecting the thing as a whole, which is its own thing. And, sometimes that just makes the scenario more difficult and less fun and unwinnable. But it gives a more different experience every time, because rather than it just being one scenario and a few branching things based on your win or loss in there, your win or losses and your decisions and maybe the items that you found and things like that, who you decided to help in the card game, are adding to the differences in that, because you are going down completely different paths as well. So I will say that as well, that if I suppose it's much more an expense to have the card game and all of those expansions that are constantly coming out. But given, if I was just asked to play a friend's copy of this, or we can play the card game and decide how long we want to play, I think I would still choose the card game. But that's not to say that we haven't had fun with this, and we are keeping it around and want to play the other scenarios and things as well. Hopefully they will be a reasonable length. I can't say that for either of the videos from today, though. I apologise for that if you haven't got much time, but you aren't watching until now, are you? If you haven't got much time, you've tuned out ages ago. You tuned out as soon as I was complaining about the bags, probably. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking now and lie down forever. Thank you for watching this. There are more playthroughs. Subscribe, like, dislike, if you want to. I'm going to go and stop doing things for a while. Bye.